It so happens that there's a Wikipedia page about me, as I've learned recently.
Hmm.
And the first thought I had when I saw that was, surely I am not notable enough. So I was very surprised and grateful that such a page could exist. And actually, just allow me to say thank you to all the incredible people that are part of creating and maintaining Wikipedia. It's my favorite website on the internet. The collection of articles that Wikipedia has created
Hmm.
is just incredible.
Yep.
We'll talk about the various details of that, but the love and care that goes into creating pages for individuals, for a big pen, for all this kind of stuff is just really incredible. So I just felt the love when I saw that page. But I also felt, just because I do this podcast, and I just through this podcast gotten to know a few individuals that are quite controversial.
Hmm.
I've gotten to be on the receiving end of something quite, to me, as a person who loves other human beings, I've gone to be at the receiving end of some kind of attacks through the Wikipedia
Hmm.
form. Like you said, when you look at living individuals, it can be quite hurtful. The
Hmm.
little details of
Yeah.
information. Um, and because I've become friends with Elon Musk
Hmm.
and I've interviewed him, but I've also interviewed people on the left, far left, people on the right. Some people would say far right. And so now you take a step, you put your toe into the cold pool of politics, and the shark emerges from the depths and pulls you right in.
Yeah.
I
The boiling hot pool of politics.
yeah, I guess it's hot, and so I got to experience some of that. I think what you also realize is, there has to be for Wikipedia kind of credible sources, verifiable
Yeah.
sources, and there's a dance there because some of the sources are pieces of journalism, and of course, journalism operates under its own complicated incentives,
Hmm.
such that people can write articles that are not factual or are cherry picking all the flaws they can have in a journalistic
For
article,
sure.
and those can be used as
For sure.
sources. It's
Hmm.
like they dance hand in hand, and so. For me, sadly enough, there was a really kind of concerted attack to say that I was never at MIT. I never did anything at MIT. Just to clarify, I am a research scientist at MIT. I have been there since 2015. I'm there today. I'm at a prestigious, amazing laboratory called LIDS, and I hope to be there for a long time. I work on AI, robotics, machine learning. There's a lot of incredible people there. And by the way, MIT has been very kind to defend me. Unlike Wikipedia says, it is not an unpaid position. There was no controversy. It was
Right.
all very calm and happy and almost boring research that I've been doing there. And the other thing, because I am half Ukrainian, half Russian,
Ah.
and I've traveled to Ukraine, and I will travel to Ukraine again, and I will travel to Russia for some very difficult conversations. My heart's been broken by this war. I have family in both places. It's been a really
I can
difficult
imagine.
time. But the little battle about the biography there also starts becoming important for the first time for me. I also want to clarify, sort of personally, use this opportunity of some inaccuracies there. My father was not born in Chkalsk, Russia. He was born in Kiev, Ukraine. I was born in Chkalsk, which is a town not in Russia. There is a town called that in Russia, but there's another town in Tajikistan, which is a former republic of the Soviet Union. That town is now called Buston, Buston, which is funny because we're now in Austin, and I also am in Boston. It seems like my whole life is surrounded by these kinds of towns. So I was born in Tajikistan, and the rest of the biography is interesting, but my family is very evenly distributed between their origins and where they grew up, between Ukraine and Russia, which adds a whole beautiful complexity to this whole thing. So I want to just correct that. It's like the fascinating thing about Wikipedia is, in some sense, those little details don't matter. But in another sense, what I felt when I saw a Wikipedia page about me or anybody I know is there's this beautiful kind of saving that this person existed, that,
Mm.
like a community that notices you. It says, huh,
Mm.
like a little. You see like a butterfly that floats, and you're like, huh, that it's not just any butterfly. It's that one. I like that one. Or you see a puppy or something, or it's this big pen. This
Mhm.
one, I remember this one has this scratch, and you get noticed in that way. And that, I don't know, that's a beautiful thing. And I mean, maybe it's very silly of me and naive, but I feel like Wikipedia, in terms of individuals, is an opportunity to celebrate people, to
For
celebrate
sure.
ideas,
For sure.
and not a battleground of attacks, of the kind of stuff we might see on Twitter, like the mockery, the
For sure.
derision, this kind of stuff.
For sure.
And of course, you don't want to cherry pick. All of us have flaws and so on, but it just feels like to highlight a controversy of some sort when that doesn't at all represent the entirety of the human, in
Yeah.
most cases,
Yeah.
is sad.
Yeah. So there's a few things to unpack and all that. So first, one of the things I always find very interesting is, your status with MIT. Okay, that's upsetting, and it's an argument and can be sorted out. But then what's interesting is you gave as much time to that, which is actually important and relevant to your career and so on, to also where your father was born, which most people would hardly notice, but is really meaningful to you. And I find that a lot when I talk to people who have a biography in Wikipedia, is they're often as annoyed by a tiny error that no one's going to notice. Like, this town in Tajikistan has got a new name and so on. Like, nobody even knows what that means or whatever, but it can be super important. And so that's one of the reasons, for biographies, we say, like, human dignity really matters. And so, some of the things have to do with, and this is a common debate that goes on in Wikipedia, is what we call undue weight. So I'll give an example. There was an article I stumbled across many years ago about the mayor. Or no, he wasn't a mayor. He was a city council member of, I think it was Peoria, Illinois, but some small town in the Midwest. And the entry, he's been on the city council for 30 years or whatever. He's frankly, pretty boring guy, and seems like a good local city politician. But in this very short biography, there was a long paragraph about his son being arrested for DUI. And it was clearly undue weight. It's like, what has this got to do with this guy, if it even deserves a mention? It wasn't even clear, had he done anything hypocritical? Had he done himself anything wrong? Even was his son got a DUI. That's never great, but it happens to people, and it doesn't seem like a massive scandal for your dad. So, of course, I just took that out immediately. This is a long, long time ago. And that's the sort of thing where, we have to really think about in a biography and about controversies to say, is this a real controversy? So in general, like, one of the things we tend to say is, like, any section. So if there's a biography and there's a section called controversies, that's actually poor practice, because it just invites people to say, oh, I want to work on this entry. Let's see, there's 7 sections. Oh, this one's quite short. Can I add something?
Right.
Go out and find some more controversies. No, that's nonsense, right? And in general, putting it separate from everything else kind of makes it seem worse, and also doesn't put it in the right context. Whereas if it's sort of a live flow, and there is a controversy, there's always potential controversy for anyone, it should just be sort of worked into the overall article, because then it doesn't become a temptation. You can contextualize appropriately and so forth. So that's, that's, part of the whole process. But I think for me, one of the most important things is what I call community health. So yeah, are we going to get it wrong sometimes? Yeah, of course. We're humans, and doing good quality, sort of reference material is hard. The real question is, how do people react, to a criticism or a complaint or a concern? And if the reaction is defensiveness or combativeness back, or if someone's really sort of in there being aggressive and in the wrong, like, no, hold on, we've got to do this the right way. You got to say, okay, hold on, are there good sources? Is this contextualized appropriately? Is it even important enough to mention? What does it mean? And sometimes one of the areas where I do think there is a very complicated flaw, and you've alluded to it a little bit, but is like, we know the media is deeply flawed. We know that journalism can go wrong. And I would say, particularly in the last, 15 years, we've seen a real decimation of local media, local newspapers. We've seen a real rise in clickbait headlines and sort of eager focus on anything that might be controversial. We've always had that with us, of course. There's always been tabloid newspapers. But that makes it a little bit more challenging to say, okay, how do we sort things out when we have a pretty good sense that not every source is valid? So, as an example, a few years ago, it's been quite a while now, we deprecated the Mail Online as a source. And the Mail Online, the digital arm of the Daily Mail, it's a tabloid. It's not completely, it's not fake news, but it does tend to run very hyped up stories. They really love to attack people and go on the attack for political reasons and so on. And it just isn't great. And so by saying deprecated, and I think some people say, oh, you banned the Daily Mail. No, we didn't ban it as a source. We just said, look, it's probably not a great source, right? You should probably look for a better source. So certainly, if the Daily Mail runs a headline saying, new cure for cancer, it's like, probably there's more serious sources than a tabloid newspaper. So, in an article about lung cancer, you probably wouldn't cite the Daily Mail. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. But also for celebrities and so forth, to sort of know, well, they do cover celebrity gossip a lot, but they also tend to have vendettas and so forth. And you really have to step back and go, is this really encyclopedic, or is this just the Daily Mail going on a rant?
And some of that requires a great community health.
It requires massive community health.
Even for me, for stuff I've seen that's kind of actually iffy about people I know, things I know about myself, I still feel like a love for knowledge emanating from the article. Yeah. Like I feel the community health. So I will take all slight inaccuracies. I love it because that means there's people, for the most part, I feel a respect and love in the search for knowledge. Like sometimes, because I also love Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange for programming related things. And they can get a little cranky sometimes to a degree where it's like, it's not as, like you can feel the dynamics of the health of the particular community and sub communities too, like a particular C# or Java or Python or whatever. Like there's little like communities that emerge. You can feel the levels of toxicity because a little bit of strictness is good, but a little too much is bad because of the defensiveness. Because when somebody writes an answer and then somebody else kind of says, well, modify it, and they get defensive, and there's this tension that's not conducive to like improving towards a more truthful depiction of like what that topic.
Yeah, a great example that I really loved this morning that I saw, someone left a note on my user talk page in English Wikipedia saying, it was quite a dramatic headline saying, racist hook on front page. So we have on the front page of Wikipedia, we have a little section called Did You Know? And it's just little tidbits and facts, just things people find interesting. And there's a whole process for how things get there. And the one that somebody was raising a question about was comparing a very well-known U.S. football player, black. There was a quote from another famous sport person comparing him to a Lamborghini, clearly a compliment. And so somebody said, actually, here's a study, here's some interesting information about how black sports people are far more often compared to inanimate objects and given that kind of analogy. And I think it's demeaning to compare a person to a car, et cetera, et cetera. But they said, I'm not deleting it, I'm not removing it. I just want to raise the question. And then there's this really interesting conversation that goes on where I think the general consensus was, you know what, this isn't like the alarming headline, racist thing on the front page of Wikipedia. That sounds, holy moly, that sounds bad. But it's sort of like, actually, yeah, this probably isn't the sort of analogy that we think is great. And so we should probably think about how to improve our language and not compare sports people to inanimate objects, and particularly be aware of certain racial sensitivities that there might be around that sort of thing if there is a disparity in the media of how people are called. And I just thought, you know what? nothing for me to weigh in on here. This is a good conversation.
Mhm.
Like, nobody's saying, people should be banned if they refer to, what was his name? Refrigerator Perry, the
Mhm.
very famous comparison to an inanimate object of a Chicago Bears player many years ago. But they're just saying, hey, let's be careful about analogies that we just pick up from the media. I said, yeah, that's good.
On the sort of deprecation of news sources is really interesting because I think what you're saying is ultimately you want to make a article by article decision, kind of use your own judgment, and it's such a subtle thing because there's just a lot of hit pieces written about individuals like myself, for example, that masquerade as kind of an objective, thorough exploration of a human being. It's fascinating to watch because controversy and hit pieces just get more clicks.
Oh, yeah.
And this is,
sure.
I guess, as a Wikipedia contributor, you start to deeply become aware of that and start to have a sense, like a radar of clickbait versus truth, like to pick out the truth from the clickbaity type language.
Oh yeah, I mean it's really important, and we talk a lot about weasel words, actually, I'm sure we'll end up talking about AI and ChatGPT,
Yes.
but just to quickly mention, in this area, I think one of the potentially powerful tools, um, because it is quite good at this. I've played around with and practiced it quite a lot. But ChatGPT 4 is really quite able to take a passage and point out potentially biased terms, to rewrite it to be more neutral. Now, it is a bit anodyne and it's a bit, cliched. So sometimes it just takes the spirit out of something that's actually not bad. It's just like, poetic language, and you're like, well, okay, that's not actually helping. But in many cases, I think that sort of thing is quite interesting. And I'm also interested in, can you imagine where you feed in a Wikipedia entry and all the sources, and you say, help me find anything in the article that is not accurately reflecting what's in the sources. And that doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be good enough to be useful to community. So if it scans an article and all the sources, and you say, oh, it came back with 10 suggestions, and 7 of them were decent, and 3 of them it just didn't understand, well, actually, that's probably worth my time to do. And it can help us, really more quickly get good people to sort of review obscure entries and things like that.
So just as a small aside on that, and we'll probably talk about language models a little bit or a lot more, but one of the articles, one of the hit pieces about me, the journalist actually was very straightforward and honest about having used GPT to write part of the article.
Oh, interesting.
And then finding that it made an error and apologized for the error that GPT-4 generated, which has this kind of interesting loop, which the articles are used to write Wikipedia pages. GPT is trained on Wikipedia, and there's like this interesting loop where the weasel words and the nuances can get lost or can propagate even though they're not grounded in reality. Somehow in the generation of the language model, new truths can be created and kind of linger.
Yeah, there's a famous webcomic that's titled Cytogenesis, which is about how an error is in Wikipedia and there's no source for it, but then a lazy journalist reads it and writes the source.
Yeah.
And then some helpful Wikipedian spots that it has no source, finds the source, and adds it to Wikipedia. And voila, magic. This happened to me once. It nearly happened. There was this, it was really brief. I went back and researched it. I'm like, this is really odd. So Biography Magazine, which is a magazine published by the Biography TV channel, had a profile of me, and it said, in his spare time, I'm not quoting exactly, it's been many years, but in his spare time, he enjoys playing chess with friends. I thought, wow, that sounds great. Like, I would like to be that guy, but actually, I mean, I play chess with my kids sometimes, but no, I'm not, it's not a hobby of mine. And I was like, where did they get that? And I contacted the magazine and said, where did that come from? They said, oh, it was in Wikipedia. And I looked in the history. There had been vandalism of Wikipedia, which was not, it's not damaging. It's just false. So, and it had already been removed. But then I thought, oh gosh, well, I better mention this to people because otherwise somebody's going to read that and they're going to add it to the entry and it's going to take on a life of its own. And then sometimes I wonder if it has, because I was invited a few years ago to do the ceremonial first move in the World Chess Championship. And I thought, I wonder if they think I'm a really big chess enthusiast because they read this biography magazine article. So, but that problem, when we think about large language models and the ability to quickly generate very plausible but not true content, I think is something that there's going to be a lot of shakeout and a lot of implications of that.
What would be hilarious is because of the social pressure of Wikipedia and the momentum, you would actually start playing a lot more chess. Just to, not only the articles are written based on Wikipedia, but your own life trajectory changes because of the Wikipedia, just to make it more convenient.
Yeah.
Aspire to.
Yes. Yeah. My aspirational